For decades, the heart of America's auto industry beat strongest in one place, Kentucky. The Toyota Georgetown plant was more than a factory. It was a symbol, a promise, proof that America could build anything and lead anyone. But today, that promise is cracking. The machines still hum, but the rhythm is off. Production lines are slowing. Entire sections are shutting down. Workers who once walked into the plant with certainty now carry quiet fear. And each passing week brings a new headline that would have sounded impossible even a few years ago. Toyota collapsing in the United States. But here's the twist the White House never saw coming. While America's auto engine sputters, a different country is accelerating. Quietly, strategically, and with a level of precision that has reshaped the entire continent's manufacturing map. That country is Canada, and its rise isn't an accident. It isn't luck. It's the result of a long-game strategy that collided perfectly with America's political gamble. What if I told you America's biggest slogan, "Make it American again," is now the very reason factories are leaving? What if the future of North American auto isn't being built in Detroit or Kentucky, but in Ontario? Today on Northern Pulse, we break down exactly how this happened and why Toyota's downfall in America became Canada's biggest win. For as long as people can remember, Kentucky's pride wasn't a sports team, a landmark, or a mining district. It was Toyota. Georgetown was the crown jewel, one of the largest Toyota manufacturing hubs in the world. If you lived anywhere within 80 miles of it, your life was connected to that plant. Maybe you worked on the line. Maybe your spouse drove parts. Maybe your small cafe fed the workers every morning before shift change. Toyota wasn't just an employer, it was the spine. But in 2025, that spine began to bend. First came whispers, a rumor that the Lexus line was slowing. Then workers noticed an unusual schedule change, a few shifts cut, a delayed order. But nobody expected the news that followed. Lexus production stopped entirely, and Toyota's RAV4 line, one of the most iconic vehicles on the planet, was quietly scaled back. You know something is wrong when truckers start talking. Drivers who used to haul full loads daily now waited for calls that never came. Local machine shops, once buzzing with orders, suddenly had empty parking lots. State officials, normally eager to show off big corporate partners, began dodging interviews. They didn't want to admit it publicly, but they knew the truth privately. This downturn was bigger than anything since the pandemic. And the most alarming part? This wasn't a simple demand issue. It wasn't a temporary market dip. The root cause didn't start in Kentucky. It started in Washington. But that wasn't the whole story, because the shockwaves were only beginning. When the White House rolled out its 25% tariffs on imported cars and auto parts, the messaging was simple: protect American jobs. The goal was to pressure global automakers into manufacturing more inside the U.S. But reality didn't match the speeches. The Center for Automotive Research reported something staggering. Automakers operating in America were hit with nearly $18 billion in new costs in the first year. Production across North America immediately dropped by more than 20,000 vehicles per day, a brutal 30% crash in less than a month. The fallout was immediate. Volvo shrank its U.S. footprint. Audi shifted operations out of reach of tariffs. Mercedes-Benz slowed expansions. Hyundai scaled back its electric rollout. Companies didn't come running into American factories, they ran away from them. The result for regular families was just as painful. New car prices crossed $50,000, smashing affordability for millions. The plan meant to bring jobs home ended up building a wall around the American economy. A wall businesses didn't want to climb. Suppliers couldn't afford the new costs, automakers couldn't keep production steady, and workers couldn't keep up with rising living expenses. But while America was choking under the weight of its own policies, one neighbor was quietly rewriting the rules of the game, and what happened next would shock everyone. Canada watched the chaos unfold and did the one thing Washington refused to do. It stayed calm. While the U.S. tightened borders, Canada opened doors. While tariffs went up, Canada lowered uncertainty. Ottawa sent a global message: if you want stability, If you want long-term strategy, come north. And global automakers listened. Honda made the first giant move with a record-breaking $15 billion EV and battery complex in Ontario. It wasn't just another plant. It was the largest investment in Honda's Canadian history. Nearly $5 billion in incentives, thousands of jobs, a full production ecosystem from minerals to finished EVs. The facility alone will reach 240,000 cars per year and 36 gigawatt-hours of battery output. Then, Toyota followed the trail. Why? Because Canada wasn't isolated. It had trade access to 50 global markets through CPTPP, CETA, USMCA, and more. A Toyota built in Ontario could reach Asia, Europe, and the US without a tariff maze. Canada's Made in Canada plan focused on 3 pillars: clean energy, long-term industrial strategy, predictability. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was effective. While America built obstacles, Canada built a path. And Toyota saw the writing on the wall. But the real surprise came when financial reports started rolling in. Toyota is known globally for efficiency, precision, and resilience. It survived recessions, earthquakes, supply chain shocks, and pandemics. But what it couldn't survive was America's tariff experiment. According to reports from Toyota's global earnings release, profit drop $9.5 billion. North American division, profit loss. Tariff-driven expense surge, $3 billion. Forecast cut, 16% decline. That wasn't a slowdown, that was a collapse. For the first time in decades, Toyota couldn't outrun the cost pressure. Suppliers couldn't deliver affordable parts. Material expenses skyrocketed, and consumer demand fell as prices rose. The company didn't mince words either. Executives openly stated, protectionism doesn't protect jobs, it relocates them. And it did. Toyota's most consistent American operations were suddenly running at half speed. Overtime vanished. Third shifts disappeared. Entire communities dependent on Toyota began feeling the economic chill. But this was only one layer of the crisis. Because tariffs didn't just hurt automakers, they tore apart something far more important: the supply chain. And once that broke, everything else followed. A modern car is built from thousands of components, sourced from dozens of countries. In the US, nearly 40% of the value of every car comes from imported parts. When tariffs hit those imports, the entire ecosystem shook. Steel, aluminum, and copper, all essential, rose between 18% and 40% in price. That alone added nearly $3,000 to the cost of every American-built vehicle. Small and mid-sized suppliers, already operating on razor-thin margins, couldn't keep up. More than 500 suppliers suspended or shut down operations. Even industry giants felt the strain. Ford cut production by 10%. GM followed with similar reductions. Auto haulers reported the weakest shipment volume in 15 years. Factories didn't just slow, they fell silent. Parking lots, once packed with freshly built cars, became empty fields. Workers spoke about uncertainty in hushed tones. Entire regions built around the auto industry saw small diners, hardware stores, and repair shops closing early or closing forever. And as the American system struggled, Canada's strategy looked stronger every day. The continent's industrial power was quietly shifting north. The contrast couldn't be clearer. In the US, factories dimmed. In Canada, construction cranes filled the sky. New EV plants, new battery centers, new mineral processing hubs, a whole ecosystem rising. Why? Because Canada solved the problems the US kept creating. Its clean energy advantage meant manufacturing cost up to 20% less per kilowatt-hour of battery power. Its long-term political consistency reassured automakers, and its global trade network allowed Canadian-built EVs to move freely. By 2030, analysts project Canada will capture nearly 40% of North America's entire EV and battery capacity. Meanwhile, the US risks losing a quarter of its auto supply chain, permanently. Every new plant in Ontario or Windsor isn't just a facility, it's an anchor. It pulls research companies, suppliers, mineral processors, and logistics hubs toward it. It forms clusters, mini cities dedicated to advanced manufacturing. America once held this advantage, but now the center of gravity is shifting. And just as the industry rebalanced itself, another fight erupted, this time in the courts. And what happened next took the crisis from economic to constitutional. As America's auto industry struggled under the crushing weight of soaring material prices and collapsing supply chains, a new battle erupted, not in factories or boardrooms, but in the nation's highest court. Small and mid-sized U.S. businesses, already pushed to the brink by tariffs they never asked for, finally snapped. They banded together into a coalition and launched a lawsuit against the White House, arguing the one thing nobody expected anyone to say out loud. The tariffs were unconstitutional. Two lower courts agreed almost instantly. Judges made it clear, tariffs act like taxes, and the Constitution gives taxing power only to Congress, not the president. That ruling alone sent shockwaves through Washington. But the administration refused to accept defeat. They appealed. And suddenly, America's trade policy wasn't just an economic issue anymore. It became a constitutional crisis. Inside the Supreme Court, the atmosphere was tense. For nearly 3 hours, justices drilled into the administration's legal arguments. The government insisted a 1977 law about national emergencies gave the president broad trade powers. But Chief Justice John Roberts pushed back, noting that the statute didn't mention tariffs anywhere. Justice Kagan questioned how allies like France and Spain could be labeled national security threats. Justice Sotomayor delivered the sharpest blow, saying plainly, if the government collects money at the border, that is a tax. Even Justice Amy Coney Barrett, normally aligned with conservative rulings, seemed skeptical. She pressed the administration to explain why tariffs were applied so broadly and whether they truly addressed a foreign threat. If the Supreme Court rules against the administration, the fallout could be historic. Billions in tariffs might have to be refunded, trade policies could collapse overnight, and the limits of presidential power could be rewritten for decades. But one truth was already undeniable. America's economic crisis wasn't created abroad. It was created at home. In the end, Toyota's collapse on American soil wasn't just a financial story. It wasn't just about tariffs or supply chains or political speeches. It became something far bigger, a mirror held up to an entire system. When one of the world's most disciplined automakers starts shrinking production in the very country it once helped fuel economically, you have to ask a bigger question. What changed? America believed tariffs would force factories home. Instead, they forced factories to look elsewhere. Instead of building opportunity, the policy built walls. Walls that companies didn't want to climb, and workers couldn't afford to stand behind. Every halted production line in Kentucky, every shuttered parts shop, every trucker waiting for a call that never comes, all of it traces back to decisions made far from the shop floor. Meanwhile, Canada played a different game. Not louder, not flashier, but smarter. While Washington embraced uncertainty, Ottawa embraced stability. While tariffs pushed automakers away, clean energy and predictable policy pulled them in. Honda didn't pour $15 billion into Ontario by accident. Toyota didn't expand north because it wanted better scenery. They moved because Canada offered something the United States no longer could: reliability. And now the results speak for themselves. Factories are rising in Ontario. Battery plants are spreading across Windsor. Supply chains are reorganizing around Canadian infrastructure. And analysts are openly saying what nobody dared to admit 10 years ago. The industrial center of North America is shifting north. So the question isn't whether the U.S. can stop Canada's rise. It's whether America even understands how fast the ground beneath it is moving. Because the biggest story of this decade may not be the collapse of a single Toyota plant, but the quiet rise of a new manufacturing superpower, right next door. And if current trends continue, the future of North American auto won't be decided in Detroit or Kentucky. It'll be decided in Canada.